Most men were taught that interest announces itself. If a woman wants you, she will say it, show it, or make it unmistakable. That belief feels reasonable, especially if you grew up in a time when signals were louder and social rules simpler. But it quietly breaks down as life adds complexity, caution, and consequence. Attraction does not disappear with age. It becomes quieter, more selective, and more strategic. By midlife, most women are not looking to broadcast desire. They are watching, they are listening, they are noticing how a man moves through a room, how he regulates himself, how he handles uncertainty. Interest is expressed through invitation rather than pursuit, through openness rather than exposure, through subtle permission rather than overt chase. This is where many capable men lose clarity. They expect desire to look like enthusiasm, like energy coming toward them. When it does not arrive in that form, they assume nothing is there. Or worse, they convince themselves that any ambiguity must mean disinterest. That assumption protects them from embarrassment, but it also keeps them from connection. What is rarely said is that subtlety is not absence, it is filtration. A woman who hopes you make the first move is not being passive. She is evaluating. She is allowing space to see whether you recognize an opening without forcing one, whether you can read a room without needing reassurance, whether you can act without being reckless or needy. This creates a tension that did not exist when everyone was younger. You are more aware of consequences now. So is she. Social missteps carry heavier weight. Rejection feels less like a bruise and more like a verdict on relevance. So men hesitate. They look for certainty first. They wait for proof. But attraction rarely offers proof up front. It offers context, eye contact that lingers a second longer than necessary, questions that are personal but not intrusive, a comfort that grows instead of fluctuates. These are not accidents. They are signals designed for a man who is present enough to notice without spiraling into analysis. The mistake is not missing a sign. The mistake is believing that desire must remove all risk before you act. That belief turns maturity into paralysis. It convinces you that caution is wisdom, when often it is just fear wearing better language. Understanding this does not mean assuming interest where none exists. It means recognizing that restraint and attraction can coexist, that a woman can want you and still want you to lead, and that the silence many men interpret as absence is often simply an invitation waiting to be met. Most men are not failing to be attractive. They are failing to trust what is already there. They demand certainty before movement, forgetting that clarity is usually revealed through action, not observation. Attraction tests presence first, not confident speeches or clever timing. When men talk about this dynamic privately, there is often a quiet edge underneath the curiosity. A sense of irritation. If she's interested, why doesn't she just say something? Why create ambiguity? Why leave the burden on me? Those questions sound logical on the surface, but they miss what has changed underneath modern attraction, especially past 40. Waiting is not a power move. It is a protective one. By this stage of life, most women have learned exactly what happens when interest is expressed too openly, too early, or to the wrong man. It invites pressure. It collapses polarity. It forces her to manage not just her own emotions, but his reaction to them. That is not romance, that is labor. So restraint becomes intelligence. Emotional economy becomes survival. She reveals less, not because she feels less, but because she knows more. There is also a deeper dynamic at work that many men were never taught to see clearly. Attraction does not operate symmetrically. Masculine and feminine energy do not initiate in the same way. Her role is often to open a door, not to walk through it first. His role is to notice the door, decide if he wants to enter, and move with intention. When those roles blur, desire tends to flatten. This is where resentment sneaks in for men who pride themselves on fairness and logic. It feels unequal. It feels like a test they did not agree to take. But polarity is not a moral system. It is an energetic one. It does not care about what should be fair. It responds to what creates attraction and safety simultaneously. From her side, waiting is a way to assess more than interest. It is a way to gauge self-possession. A man who can initiate calmly without forcing, who can handle a yes without inflation and a no without collapse, signals emotional steadiness. That steadiness is more attractive at 50 than bravado ever was at 25. Men often assume that her hesitation means uncertainty about him. More often, it is certainty about herself. She knows what chaos feels like. She knows what it costs to invite the wrong energy. So she leaves space, not to manipulate, but to observe. When this is misunderstood, men either overcorrect or withdraw. They chase, performing confidence that feels hollow, or they retreat into passivity, telling themselves they are being respectful when they are really avoiding vulnerability. Neither position creates clarity. The shift happens when you stop trying to decode her behavior as a puzzle and start understanding your role within the dynamic, not as a performer, not as a supplicant, but as a grounded presence who can step forward without needing guarantees. Waiting is not her asking you to prove your worth. It is her allowing you to show how you move when nothing is promised. That moment reveals more about both of you than any direct declaration ever could. By midlife, attraction is no longer a simple impulse. It is filtered through memory, consequence, and awareness. You feel desire, but it does not arrive alone. It brings risk with it. The risk of misreading, the risk of embarrassment, the risk of being seen as out of step in a culture that feels less forgiving and more suspicious than the one you grew up in. So you hesitate not because you lack confidence, but because you have context. You have lived long enough to know that one wrong move can echo longer than it used to. You have watched men lose reputations, relationships, and self-respect over moments they thought were harmless. You have also learned that money, age, and status do not insulate you from rejection. If anything, they raise the stakes. When you are younger, rejection feels temporary. Later, it can feel like commentary. This creates a tension that most men never articulate. You still want connection, intimacy, and desire, but you are no longer willing to pay any price for them. You want certainty before action. You want safety before exposure. And that is where the dilemma tightens. Caution gets mislabeled as wisdom. Overthinking gets framed as discernment. You tell yourself you are being respectful, measured, evolved. And sometimes you are, but sometimes you are simply managing fear with better vocabulary. The problem is not that you think, it is that you think instead of being present. You analyze tone, timing, and intent until the moment you were meant to respond has already passed. Attraction does not punish you loudly for this. It just cools, quietly, politely, without drama. What makes this especially difficult is that the world has genuinely changed. Social rules are less clear. Signals feel more ambiguous. Men are warned constantly about what not to do, rarely about how to do something well. So hesitation feels justified, it feels responsible. But presence is not recklessness. Initiative is not aggression. There is a difference between moving forward with awareness and freezing in the name of safety. One creates clarity, the other prolongs uncertainty. Many men reach this stage believing that the goal is to eliminate risk entirely, to wait until interest is undeniable, to wait until the invitation is explicit. But attraction rarely rewards perfect timing. It responds to grounded movement, to a man who can feel desire, acknowledge risk, and still choose action without urgency or apology. This does not mean ignoring your instincts. It means trusting a different one. Not the instinct to protect your image, but the instinct to remain present in the moment rather than retreat into calculation. Desire does not need you to be fearless. It needs you to be available. When thinking replaces presence, you disappear from the interaction without ever leaving the room. Reclaiming initiative at this stage of life is less about courage and more about refusing to outsource your decisions to fear dressed up as reason. Making the first move has been poorly framed for a long time. Men are told it means chasing, impressing, selling themselves, or risking rejection in some dramatic way. That framing makes initiative feel performative, as if you are stepping onto a stage and hoping for applause. For an experienced man, that is exhausting and unnecessary. Real initiation is quieter than that. It is not a plea for approval. It is an emotional offer made without urgency. You are not asking to be chosen. You are revealing interest and allowing the situation to respond. This distinction matters because many men stop initiating, not due to fear of rejection, but due to fear of becoming someone they no longer respect. They do not want to posture. They do not want to chase signals. They do not want to feel like they are trying to earn attraction. That instinct is healthy. The mistake is assuming that the only alternative to performance is passivity. Calm initiation does not collapse your value. It expresses it. When you make a first move without rushing, without overselling, without needing a specific outcome, you are not putting yourself below her. You are placing yourself clearly in the interaction. That clarity is often what she has been waiting for. There is a difference between reaching and stepping forward. Reaching is driven by anxiety. Stepping forward is driven by presence. One seeks reassurance. The other offers direction. Women feel this difference immediately, even if they could not articulate it. Making the first move becomes risky only when your sense of self is attached to the response. If a yes validates you and a no diminishes you, then every interaction feels like a gamble. But when your identity is not on the line, initiation loses its drama. It becomes information, not judgment. At this stage of life, self-respect is not maintained by avoiding exposure. It is maintained by acting in alignment with who you are. If you feel interest and do nothing, that misalignment erodes you quietly. If you express interest cleanly and receive a no, your integrity remains intact. The loss is external, not internal. This is why grounded men often appear more confident without trying. They are not managing impressions. They are responding honestly to what they feel. They do not confuse restraint with authenticity. They do not confuse boldness with aggression. They simply allow their actions to match their awareness. Initiation done this way does not push, it invites, it does not corner, it opens space, and it does not require certainty beforehand. It creates certainty through movement. When you stop treating the first move as a test you might fail and start treating it as an expression of presence, the dynamic changes. The interaction becomes less about outcome and more about alignment. That shift restores a sense of agency that many men lose through overcaution. Self-respect is not preserved by staying silent. It is preserved by showing up cleanly, without performance, and allowing reality to reveal itself. Clarity is rarely found in waiting, it is found in motion. That is one of the quieter truths men learn later in life, often after years of hesitation disguised as patience. When you lead, even in small ways, reality responds. When you do not, ambiguity lingers and slowly turns into doubt about yourself rather than the situation. Many men hold on to the idea that if they just observe long enough, the truth will reveal itself without risk. That attraction will eventually declare its intentions clearly, removing the need for initiative. But attraction does not work on that timeline. It responds to presence, not surveillance. Without movement, all you collect is interpretation, not information. Leading does not guarantee the outcome you want. It guarantees something more valuable. It ends the guessing. A grounded expression of interest either meets openness or it does not. Both answers are clean. Both allow you to move forward without carrying unfinished emotional business. This is where mature masculinity separates itself from younger urgency. The goal is not to secure a particular response. It is to relate to reality directly. When you lead from that place, rejection loses its sting, not because it feels good, but because it feels honest. It is not a judgment of your worth, it is simply feedback. Men who avoid leading often believe they are preserving dignity. In practice, they prolong uncertainty and quietly drain their own confidence. Each unexpressed moment becomes another internal question mark. Over time, those questions add weight. You start doubting your instincts, your timing, your relevance, not because reality rejected you, but because you never allowed reality to respond at all. Initiative shortens that cycle. It respects your time and hers. It replaces fantasy with facts. It also builds a form of self-trust that cannot be developed through thinking alone. You learn that you can act without knowing the outcome and remain steady regardless of the result. This is what outcome independence actually looks like. Not indifference, but stability. You care enough to step forward and you are secure enough to accept what comes back. That balance is deeply attractive, but more importantly, it is stabilizing for you. Leading is not about control. It is about responsibility for your own experience. When you take responsibility, you stop waiting for permission to be clear. You stop outsourcing your confidence to external signals. You become someone who interacts with life directly rather than orbiting around possibility. At this stage, decisiveness is not loud, it is quiet and unforced. It shows up as a willingness to engage, to express, and to move on when needed. That quality does not just shape romantic outcomes. It reshapes how you see yourself. When you lead, you learn the truth faster. And with that truth comes calm, not because everything works out, but because nothing is left unresolved inside you.